agenda.
She's not here. She took a break.
That's the one I wanted to go to. It's supposed to be. Yes.
Hello.
So Raymond,
Yes, sir.
on your motion, she'll do the consent agenda, and then she's gonna hand over LEAC and then ferry boats to me, right?
Thank you very much.
Use,
Yeah.
use. Text me. Text me, text me. Yes, sir.
Wait.
Good. Okay.
Silent.
Yeah. Okay, this is Commissioner Laura Nichols Sams. We just finished executive session. You need to do a roll call.
No, no. Yeah, we did.
And no, we had somebody that just came.
Who?
He wasn't here when we went into
For executive
executive session, right?
No, I got it, right?
You just
He's here now?
announced.
Okay, well, I'd like to acknowledge Commissioner McGrath has joined us. And the next thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. No.
We need to, for executive session.
I didn't hear
We
you.
need to get related to what took place in executive session.
Boyd, can you please report what took place in executive session?
We discussed pending litigation and offered legal advice on pending matters. No final actions or decisions were taken in executive session.
Thank you, Attorney Spring. Now, the next thing on the agenda is number 2, consent agenda. Who speaks on that?
Good morning, Brenda Connor, Accounts Maintenance Officer. This morning, we'd like to enter assessments on the following docket. Docket 556, Vitality Universal Service Fund Certification, $130. And docket 669, Broadband VI, application for ETC designation in the amount of $260.
Motion to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
We vote on it, please.
Commissioner Clement McGrath,
Yes.
Commissioner Laura Nicholson,
Yes.
Commissioner Raymond Williams,
Yes.
Commissioner David Hughes,
Yes.
Okay. So at this point, I'm gonna relinquish my chair to Chair David Hughes for the renumbered items. What did we say? Number 4, and the new numbers 3 and number 4.
Thank you, Vice Chair Nicholas Sams. This is Chair Hughes. We're going to take up new item, I guess it would be 3, energy matters. Docket 702, the WAPA Levelized Energy Adjustment Clause. This comes to us in 2 parts. The first is a discussion, a filing of LEAC for the period July 1st, 2026 to September 30th, 2026. It's incumbent upon the commission to set this rate. WAPA has made a filing. Would staff care to make its report on the filing?
Yeah, so we have staff, we have Mr. Julius Wright, Mr. Brockman, and Mr. Courtney Mark online. Mr. Wright, I believe, will offer our first comments.
Good morning, Mr. Wright, and welcome to the commission.
Good morning, Mr.
Please
Excuse me.
proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. I want to thank the commission first off for having their trust in us. This has been an interesting project. And let me give you a little bit of background about how we went about our business. First, we had a lot of catching up to do since we have not been working on island and weren't familiar with WAPA. I lived there and I knew of them, but had never worked with them. And early on, we established a methodology where we looked at the whole project and broke it up into several sections. Those sections included the minimum filing requirements, the load forecast, the model engineering inputs, fuel and transportation costs, generation operations, and the related LEAC rate development, deferred fuel, and then the water-related LEAC cost. Early on, as we were doing our investigation, we were at a number of reports, anything from news media to other consultant reports to past orders of the commission, and several issues started coming to light that we thought needed to be further investigated that went beyond the LEAC, and we called those strategic issues, and we broke those down into both operational strategic issues and general management issues, and they're detailed in our report in chapters 10 and 11, and we think we made a number of recommendations regarding those strategic issues and how we think they should be looked at further in the rate case. As far as our report itself, we stand ready to discuss it or answer any questions. The major recommendations that we have, number one, is that we think that the commission should accept LEAC's offer to keep the LEAC rate at 22.22 cents per kilowatt hour. There are a number of reasons for this, but the primary one being that the issues in Iran and the increase in fuel costs leads us to conclude they're going to under collect probably for sure in the third quarter of 26. They probably under collected in the second quarter of 26. In the information that we have, they over collected in the third and fourth quarter of 25 and probably in the first quarter of 26 to the tune of around $15 million. That should have been applied to their deferred fuel balance that they were carrying forward. But
Mr. Wright, if I could
yes.
stop you, that's going to be a topic of discussion here in just a moment. I'd like to go ahead and dispense with the actual current rate setting process. We have a second piece of this, which is going to deal with things like the deferred fuel account, how we're going to handle it, and the accrued deficits or surpluses that have occurred in the last 3 quarters. So it's just let's stay on the topic of setting the rate and your report regarding that.
Okay, and with respect to that, we think keeping the rate where it is the better way to go forward. WAPA, as we all know, is cash strapped. We believe they're certainly going to undercollect their fuel in the third quarter of 26, even at the 22.22 cents per kilowatt hour. However, once the issues in Iraq or in Iran rather begin to be resolved, we see there are indications the fuel prices are already beginning to come down, the diesel fuel prices. So we believe this will help WAPA get back on track in terms of having much lower under collections towards the end of the third quarter of 26. Also, we think that because they are so cash strapped, it's not in the best interest of the customers, the commission, or the company to leave them in such a situation that they can't pay their vendors and collect their fuel costs. So that's why we're making the recommendation we're making. At the same time, we have a number of other recommendations. For example, as it relates to the deferred fuel balance, which you mentioned, and also we think that one of the major recommendations we would make is, and one of our findings was that WAPA, they've got the 4 new phase 2 Wärtsilä units. They have been struggling to convert those to be a dual fuel unit. In that struggle, we found out that they are intertwined in terms of how they operate. And one of our recommendations is that we think WAPA needs to tell the commission within 20 days if, how, and how much it would cost to segregate one of those Wärtsilä units if they're still having the problem trying to switch them to LPG, and take one unit and keep trying to convert that to LPG. But it is much cheaper to burn the new Wärtsilä units running diesel fuel than to continue to try to run on LPG and in its place run Unit 15, because Unit 15 is so inefficient compared to the new Wärtsilä units. So that's one of our other primary recommendations, that if they could somehow segregate one of the Wärtsilä units, keep trying to run it on LPG, run the others on diesel, up to a diesel cost probably in excess of $5. It's cheaper to run that than to run Unit 15 on diesel or LPG.
Mr. Wright, does that assumption or is that recommendation calculate that WAPA has the generation capacity to leave 15 off if it's potentially pulling off a Wärtsilä as well?
Yes, based on what we were able to see, they have enough capacity in the 7 Wärtsilä units to do that. Yes.
And maybe in addition, Unit 27, if that's come back to us.
If it comes back, yes.
Okay. We will try and remember to include that piece of your recommendations from your report in any motion we make today.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner.
In that process, in the considerations that have been proffered, how does the fact that the consistent power outages, amongst the varying available, well, among the units, how does that factor into, the whole discussion here? Does that have any bearings on the work that you're doing?
Yes and yes and no. And I would refer you to section 7 of our report. We dove into the major outages on all 3 islands over the last year. Generally speaking, we found that there were a couple of issues that need to be further investigated. And those involve things like the NOx pump. I think it's on unit 27. It's gone out, and why it's hard to get those parts online or get it back up to speed. Those type issues are going to take more of an engineering type of approach and study. But the thing that we saw is WAPA's main goal should be to keep the lights on. And so far they've been swamped just trying to do that. And issue after issue keeps coming up. And the main problems that I found was that for whatever reason, the Wärtsilä units have just not operated the phase 2 as they should have. Now, whether they were misspecified, whether they were promised something that couldn't be done, that remains questions to be seen. But the Wärtsilä units, once they were specified, they're the first ones that Wärtsilä had ever built to do an LPG diesel dual fuel type. They had done LNG and diesel, but not LPG. So, I mean, I don't know all the issues there, but I think that bears further discussion or further investigation.
Chip, this is Larry Brockman. There's a fairly extensive analysis of all those outages, as you say, in I guess it's chapter 7, which you can read. The commissioners can read if they're really interested in each one of them. We go into detail, giving our sort of opinion on whether or not WAPA was responsive and responsible, and so on. So I think that's where you would look to see all those outages. It's chapter 7 of our report.
Mr. Brockman, just because we got a lot of new faces today, so if you would just take a second, introduce yourself to the commission, please.
Oh, okay. My name is Larry Brockman. I got my degree in engineering, mostly electrical engineering. I went to work out of school for a small municipal utility in Florida and did distribution, transmission, and generation planning. I went from there back to grad school for a while, and then I went to the Public Service Commission in Florida and worked there 5 years. Then I came up to Atlanta to a little company called Energy Management Associates. We wrote production costing simulation software as well as financial simulation software for utilities. I was in their consulting department. I guess I've done about 30 years worth of expert testimony on revenue requirements, cost of service, planning, and that sort of thing. So that's my background.
Thank you. While we're doing that, we've got Mr. Courtenay also with us today. Again, new face. Mark, could you take just a second and give us your introduction and background, please?
You're on mute.
Courtney, we can't hear you.
Oh, sure. Thank you very much, Chairman Hughes, and good morning, commissioners of the PSC. My name is Courtney Mark. I'm a graduate electrical engineer with specialty in the area of electrical power systems, generation, transmission, and distribution. I worked for 37 years with the Trinidad and Tobago Electricity Commission. It is the largest power system in the Caribbean with a peak demand in excess of 1,400 megawatts with an installed capacity of over 2,000 megawatts, comprising generation of simple cycle gas turbines, combined cycle, and notably in the island of Tobago, which is connected to Trinidad via an undersea cable, We have 4 Wärtsilä reciprocating engines in that plant. So I am familiar with Wärtsilä. I'm familiar how they configure their power stations. I can understand some of the issues faced with WAPA. And I headed the technical department in TNTech. I was the chief technical officer and for many months acted as the general manager of the electricity company. I also had to interface with the regulator. So I'm familiar with regulatory matters. I'm familiar with the role of the regulator in the utility sector and how they relate to the national public. If you have any further questions for me, I don't want to take up too much time. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Let's continue down the line with the commissioners for questioning of the consultants. Raymond Williams, any further questions? I can come back to you.
Yeah, you can come back. I'm not going to
Okay. Commissioner McGrath, good morning.
Yes, I'm interested as to whether the consultants took any time to look at the Wärtsilä contracts in terms of their requirements.
No, we did not look at those contracts, but that is one of the strategic issues that we identified that need to be further investigated. As a former commissioner, and I was in process engineering in large chemical plants for 12 years, that's my background, and I was a utility commissioner. It's a puzzlement to me that the citizens of the Virgin Islands don't have a system that operates better and that those units are not operating better. As I said, they were the first of its kind that Wärtsilä had built. So looking at those contracts needs to be something that is done to find out what was promised, what's been delivered, and whether or not there's any issues there.
Thank you.
If I could just assist with the response to that question, please. We had the experience when we were installing 4 Wärtsilä machines in the island of and there was a delay in commissioning. Also, there were defects during the construction. What I can say is while we did not see the contracts, from my experience, we invoked provisions in that contract. There were remedies for defects during construction, and there were certain liquidated damages for delays in meeting the completion times. I would expect that any contract of that nature should have similar provisions in the contract, would have also dispute resolutions, and very, very familiar with generation contracts. I've negotiated 5 generation contracts for billions of dollars with all the generators coming into Trinidad and Tobago. And we have all had provisions to protect against risk associated with delays and defects. That's my contribution to what the contract ought to provide for.
I would suggest to this commission that maybe we ought to have the consultants take a look at the contracts as well, because I think that's where some of the problem lies.
I would agree with that. I think Courtney is right on, and that's something that's actually one of our recommendations on the strategic issues, that we need to do some investigation of that contract and look at the guarantees and look at what has happened. It's a puzzlement to me as a former commissioner why there aren't some financial responsibilities of Wärtsilä on all these issues.
Gentlemen, when we just remind a discussion we had in executive session, we're not going to burden the billing of our consultants here any more than is necessary during a period of reduced cash flow on assessments. So it's a great recommendation. It's going to have to wait until we can afford those additional billings. So we'll take that up when we get some clarity. Don't want to have you working and not getting paid. Commissioner McGrath, any additional questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Commissioner Nichols-Sams.
No, I don't have any questions. Thank you.
I had just 2 questions. Gentlemen, you're aware in the LEAC calculation, I think, because I thought I saw the numbers, about our prior orders, which by order limit the non-rev production, kind of the inside the fence production losses, I believe to 2.5%, and line loss, which we define loosely as any non-billed revenue outside the fence, I believe is 6.6 is the limit that we've set for WAPA to be able to recognize in LEAC. You're aware of those prior orders?
Yes.
And those were implemented in your recommendations in terms of the calculation?
Yes, WAPA in their filing of June the 3rd made 3 different runs. One included that level of production and line losses. The other 2 had a higher level of production and line losses. One of our recommendations on, I think it's on page 15 of our report, maybe on page 14, 14 or 15, is that WAPA be instructed to do a study on those production line losses so that we have some updated information regarding what they actually should be. WAPA indicated to us that the 2.5% and 6.6% were an optimistic number. They didn't think they were really correct.
Chip, on page 6 of our report, there's a nice table that summarizes those 3 scenarios that WAPA did that the commission may want to look at. It sort of summarizes, easy to look at. So
yeah,
yep.
I've seen the table. I bring it up just to note that those are orders of the commission, and any recommendations that you make needs to incorporate them. I appreciate that WAPA does other calculations for our information, but our LEAC rate preclude including additional line losses in the calculations that you make for us. So those are still firm orders. They were arrived at, by the way, in consultation with WAPA years ago. Nothing's really happened that shouldn't have actually improved those numbers over time. And WAPA is, of course, working on a new AMI system, which should finally allow them to get some control over the non-revenue billings that are occurring, particularly in the St. Croix district. So we're kind of waiting to see this new AMI system in, which will allow them to identify those sources of loss for production. Just again, you guys are new, and this is a long topic that we've had around for a while, but that's kind of where we're at with that. We'll take a look at those numbers when WAPA can identify where those losses actually occur. They can't do that in their current metering environment.
We understand that.
Chair, I'd like to acknowledge Senator Carla Joseph has arrived, so if she has any questions as well.
Commissioner Joseph, welcome. Good to see you here.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and a pleasant good day to everyone. I do have one question, and this is going to be directed to Consultant Mark. I noted your introduction. You mentioned that you are familiar with Wärtsilä. The Wärtsiläs that is operating in Tobago, I gather, they're still in operation, correct? Great. Are they dual fuel or are they just primary one fuel? Because the last four Wärtsiläs that we have are dual fuel.
Right. Dual fuel, LNG, they were on natural gas, not liquefied, natural gas.
What's the difference?
Natural gas system in Trinidad sends the gas, not a liquid, sends the gas to the machines, and that gas is then changed to burn together with diesel. So in Tobago, which is a technology Wärtsilä is very, very familiar with, they're top of the game with that. That natural gas is methane. Methane is a combination of carbon and hydrogen. In the case of the Virgin Islands, you're now burning a liquid fuel called propane. And the propane chemistry is very, very different from the methane chemistry. And there are certain processes that have to take place to allow that to burn. So when our lead consultant, Dr. Wright, speaks about the first time they are doing it, yes, the term dual fuel is not familiar, is very familiar to Wärtsilä, but the combination of fuels that are being burnt is very, very first on the island.
Okay, and so in your, I want to stick on that topic. in your experience and knowledge base, Mr. Mark and other consultants, you can chime in. Has Wärtsilä have an experience in burning the type of dual fuel that they burn here in the Virgin Islands? Because based on what you've mentioned, Mr. Mark, in Tobago, they don't seem to have an issue because it's actual substance that you're burning in Trinidad and Tobago, which now here, this is more propane.
That is correct. But what I should also point out, regardless of what technology is using, under the contract is a certain testing protocol when generating plant is commissioned. When the plant is commissioned, first to begin, there's an off-site visit of the plant. There is a factory inspection. The plant is assembled in the factory and inspected. You go and you visit your plant to see your machines. When the plant lands in your island, there's an on-site inspection which has to be signed off. When the plant is assembled and commissioned, there are a number of protocols and tests that the client must see and sign off. The final commissioning test and the test certificates is the sign-off that relieves the contractor from his installation responsibilities. At that, clock starts and the defect liability period kicks in. Any defects under defect liability period can account for liquidated damages, the remedy factored into the contract, and can trigger a dispute resolution. I'm very, very familiar with how these contracts are negotiated, how they are structured, and how they are managed. Very, very familiar.
Okay, I understand that clearly. Just as Commissioner McGrath has stated, you do need to see our contract that was negotiated with Wärtsilä, because since its commissioning, we've been having some major challenges with the last 4 Wärtsiläs, and those are the one that has a dual. And the dual energy source is not similar to what happens in Tobago. Thank you so much for being here.
Senator Joseph, to take up your question a little bit further, and maybe just for the interest of the public, I think it's important to understand that when we talk about dual fuel, a lot of people think that that's a really bright idea because you can burn diesel or you can burn LPG in our case. That actually is not what these engines do. They're only dual fuel in the sense that they have to have diesel and LNG to burn, not LNG, LPG, to burn propane. So these were, to answer your question, to my knowledge, the only 3 engines that Wärtsilä has ever produced, and they were somewhat experimental, and they're clearly not working out very well. And they have not sold another engine of this type to anybody since. So they were probably ill-advised for the purchase by WAPA because they were unproven, and they've proven to be so. But in answer to your question, there is no one running this engine anywhere that I am aware of because they haven't sold another single one to another entity. They are not true traditional dual fuel in the sense that they give us a flexibility to use either of our fuels. They actually lock us into the opposite position, which is we have to have both fuels to run them efficiently. I hope that makes sense.
Chairman,
I am totally aware of that, and I believe you have another commissioner who has a question.
Let's stay with Mr. Mark here for just a minute.
And I just want to make a very fundamental point, because you did raise the issue of losses, and you did recap that you believe, and you quoted correctly, that the allowed production loss is 2.5%, and the allowed transmission losses are 6.6%. But I just wanted to point out fundamentally that 2.5% is now based on the units sold. In other words, if the units sold were to vary, that 2.5% allowable production loss will vary. And fundamentally, that is wrong. In principle, that is wrong. You do not base losses on energy sold for this own use, for this production loss. It is based on the capacity of the plant. There's a certain relationship between the capacity installed in the plant and the production for energy. It does not depend on the units sold. That energy used in production is to supply the auxiliaries, a number of auxiliaries in the power station. I'll be happy once certain things are put in place to give you an extensive report, to make an extensive recommendation through Julius Wrights and Associates on how it is calculated, what it ought to be. One thing I can say to this commission for certain, it is not based on the units sold.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. I'm going to finish my questions because I was interrupted by the entry of the senator. Just had two other things. Your report notes a consistent solar underperformance to specifications. I just didn't want to let that get through your report without giving you an opportunity to comment. I believe the implication there was that every single renewable energy project that we have is not actually performing to its production specification. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, there's a specified capacity for each of those renewable units that you have, whether it's a solar farm or whatever, but you don't have any wind that I know of. I know there's some being planned. And it was just that every output I saw for every single month, they never met their output that was the optimal output from the Plexus model. Now, whether or not that is because the solar panels are getting dirty or getting old or for whatever reason, but in the future, you either need to adjust for that or someone needs to explain why that is. I mean, you either need to adjust your output down for those units so that the model is correctly characterizing how they're actually performing, or you need to tell us why they're not performing as they should.
So you're pointing out that this is a problem in the Plexus model, at least where we're concerned today. It's just the dispatch is being made to be incorrect.
Well, this dispatch is incorrect, but it's just they're consistently underperforming. And the problem is since they're a purchase power contract, it's really incumbent on the person selling the energy to keep the solar panels clean and operating as efficiently as possible. The problem is with solar, as we all know, they diminish about 4 to 5% or 3 to 5% every year in their output. So we just have to understand that in the model, if you're going to tell me it's going to put out a maximum capacity of 8 megawatts and it only puts out 6.5 every, then fine, let me model it at 6.5.
I'm certain that Mr. Loranger would like to be putting out as much as possible because he gets paid for production, not
Absolutely.
specification. We will send you his way when we have an opportunity to expand your scope financially, and you can answer those questions for us. Last question I had was, I just wanted to make clear your understanding is within your recommendation that you have a stipulated rate agreement. I don't want to have to bring the WAPA people on to say that they're good with 22.23. But your understanding is their recommendation walks in line with yours with respect to the 22.23 retention of the current rate. Yes?
That is what their cover letter said. They wanted to retain it. Yes, sir.
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Hughes, could I make one comment? I know you know this, but for the other commissioners, perhaps benefit. In that table 1 on page 6, scenario 3 is the LEAC charge if we went with the commission 2.5% and 6%. So that's the number that it would become, not 22 cents. Just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Understand that. Thank you. Commissioner Williams is back. I promise to come back to him, and we can come back to any other commissioner that has further questions or comments, having heard the discussion so far. Raymond?
I have no other comments. I'm ready to make a motion when it's allowed.
Any other comments from the commission?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Mark.
Please go.
During his presentation, he indicated that during production, installation and operation of these units, an inspection is required or should be done. Do we know if WAPA did these inspections?
We are not in a position to say, Dr. would have indicated that we have not had sight of the contract. The contract ought to make such provisions quite clearly on these inspection requirements. And there is a formal signed over. There is a closure certificate that must be signed that basically states that WAPA is certified, having witnessed and seen these machines perform. And there are a number of tests that are done, fuel consumption, heat rates. There is a whole long list of things that must be ticked off. I have actually refused to tick off on a close-off certificate. I was instructed once by my board, but look, let us go ahead and we could redeem. We need to get the plant online. But it's a very strict protocol to close off the installation before the machine is deemed fully commissioned. And
So we don't know if these inspections were ever done by WAPA,
or to what extent.
or to what extent. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your report. Commissioner Williams, you have a motion?
Yes, I move that the commission accept the proposed rate as proffered by our consultants. I think it's 22.23. 22.23 cents per kilowatt hour. So moved.
Second.
I think it's 22.22, isn't it?
I believe it's 2.3,
Oh, is it?
unless it's changed over the last 6 years. So
And
we have a motion before the commission. It's seconded.
let me just add for the period of July 1, 2026 to September 30, 2026. Thank you.
Any further
Or can you
discussion
clarify the-
on the motion?
Yes, or can you clarify the rate? So whether it's 22,
The existing rate is 22.2226 to carry it out to the full depth.
So technical amendment to correct for the record the rate of 22.2226 cents per kilowatt hour.
Commissioner Williams, we are inside the window, the 30-day requirement window of filing. So a waiver will be required also of that time requirement. Do you want to amend your motion?
Amendment to waive the public, the requirement for public notice. So moved.
Any
Second.
further discussion on the motion? We have a motion before the commission, which is seconded to retain the existing 22.2223 rate, which exists today for the period July 1st through the end of September of 2026, together with a waiver of the time filing requirement. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Clement McGrath,
yes.
Commissioner Laura Nichols Sims.
Yes.
Commissioner Raymond Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner David Hughes.
Yes.
You have 4 votes in yea.
Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, gentlemen, for the report. Look forward to additional work. The second item within this docket, if I can get my agenda up here, deals with essentially discussion a little bit of the deferred fuel account. And I think it's useful to do a little history check here, going back to September of last year, where the commission had ordered a lower REAC rate. The utility petitioned for reconsideration. It was denied and then challenged, or at least threatened to challenge, to retain through the court process the rate. That led to some discussion in executive session with Director Knight about how to resolve that issue, whereby the commission made it clear we would be happy to negotiate a certain amount of working capital to come out of the deferred fuel balance, but we needed a process to do that. And in that September meeting, I think I have this right, and Attorney Sprain, correct me if you think I'm getting this wrong. The commission and the utility, the authority, negotiated a stipulated settlement whereby the deferred fuel balance was agreed at that time to be zero. However, with the provision that we would at that point begin calculating any additional changes to the deferred fuel account coming forward from zero to the extent that they arrived in a deficit. That any surplus, however, would be retained by the utility and not included in the June 30th, 2026 LEAC, which we have just adopted. The practical effect of that is that if there were a surplus to occur between September 2025 and June 30th, that the utility would be allowed to retain that surplus without any reflection within a deferred fuel account. If there were a deficit in that period calculated, then that would become a new deferred fuel entry on July 1st, 2026, and the commission would then start a discussion about recovery of those amounts. We don't have a calculation yet, or we haven't ordered one, for the period September through June 30th. That's still a calculation we're going to have to do. But that was the stipulated agreement with respect to deferred fuel. If there was a surplus on July 1st, the deferred fuel account was agreed to be zero and should be adjusted off the books of the authority. If there was a deficit, then that deficit becomes the new deferred fuel count on July 1st, and the commission has agreed that we can take steps to allow that recovery. So in that context, because I know it was a little confusing because we didn't really document it all that well, in that context, for our consultants, does that help? I mean, that summary, or is that different than what you understood?
It's generally consistent with what we understood. As I recall, they had a deferred fuel balance of 147 million or so under collected as of the first of the third quarter 2025. So that'd be July 1st, 2025. Between the third and fourth quarter of 2025 and the first quarter of 2026, we think they over collected by the tune of around 15 million, maybe a little bit more. Those dollars, we don't know what happened in the second quarter of 2026. They haven't filed anything, but those dollars should have been applied to the under collection. And as of July 1st, assuming they still have some over collection, they would keep that over collection. If they had under collection, it would simply be an under collection. But as of July 1st of this year, that deferred fuel balance would be written to zero and started again anew. That was my understanding reading the order.
So
Yeah, that's not correct though.
Well, Director Knight, I'll come back to you and we'll get your thoughts on this in a minute. But the path for the commission is going to be that we need to calculate the September to June 30th aggregate amount of the utilities accounting. We need to agree on that number, and then an accounting adjustment of some sort will need to take place on the books and be ordered by the commission to take place on the books of the utility. Director Knight, would you like to give us your understanding of the stipulated agreement?
Yeah, I think real simple. We agreed that we would continue collecting under the current rates for FY 2026. We would start a new accounting, which we have done, that started on July 1st of 2025. And we would keep a new accounting of the over-under recovery on fuel, which we have been doing. We have 2 quarters of information. We're about to submit the third quarter. The consultant is right. I think we have accounting up until December, and I think we're about to submit the January-March period. On July 1st, the new accounting would take over. We would erase any further claims to anything left on the 147 million balance that existed as of July 1st of last year. And we would move forward with the new deferred fuel balance as tracked since July 1st of last year.
Can you translate that into an example for us? Because that sounds an awful lot like you're going to attempt to retain some of the 140 that was on the books back last July.
Again, being clear, we have agreed in that stipulated agreement that on July 1st, in the next few weeks, anything that's unrecovered from that 147 million balance, we will unfortunately forego that amount. However, we insisted in that agreement that we started a new accounting last July 1st, and that accounting would become the accounting of record as of July 1st. So while we'll no longer make claims on the 147, we are keeping a meticulous account of the deferred fuel that began on July 1st, and that is the amounts that we hope to recover. Or if we have over recovered, that would be the over recovery on record. So we're
So-
not trying to keep anything beyond July 1st. Whatever is unrecovered on that original balance, we close it at that point in time, and whatever is unrecovered at that point in time, we will forfeit as part of the agreement to settle this matter, just so that we can get a clean accounting with a new consultant, new numbers, and we could stop squabbling over the old accounting on the old deferred fuel balance.
I think we're saying the same thing, but for your benefit, I want to make it clear that the PSC's position is that if you over recover in this calculation of
Mhm.
fiscal 26, which would be July of 25 through June 30th, 2026, correct? If you were to over recover, it's our position, you will keep those funds. There will not be an over recovery on the books that you need to return to ratepayers.
All right, and that's acceptable to us.
Okay, thank you. I think unless there are, if everybody kind of understand where we're going with this, because, okay?
Yes.
I think that probably satisfies the LEAC recovery item in our agenda today, unless.
Mr. Chairman, there's just two points I want to interject as I was listening to the conversation. I do feel it's important for the public record. Well, probably 3 points. I think I could also address Commissioner McGrath's concerns. But the generators that we got from Wärtsilä are in fact dual fuel, in the sense that they can run solely on diesel, or in diesel operation in diesel mode, and they can run in LPG mode. We have used them in to quite efficient success in a diesel only mode. We also have used them at sporadically in LPG only mode. We know there's a technical nuance where there is a pilot light that is a diesel provided pilot light. So we do have, even when in LPG mode, there is a small residual, about 5% residual of fuel that is diesel, that is used to keep the pilot light lit. But they consume primarily LPG when in LPG mode, and they consume exclusively diesel when in diesel mode. I just want to make sure that's clear for the public. I think that might have gotten a little muddled. When we're looking at, I do have to continue to digest the consultant's report. I just want to make sure that it was mentioned VI Electron, and we would take a look at VI, have Christian Lorenger involved in the conversation on the solar farm output. Remember, we also have two much older solar farms, totaling about 9 megawatts that are managed by BMR. And so I just want to throw that in there. VI Electron is not the only solar farms that we purchase power from. And so I just want to make sure that the commissioner and the general public is aware that there is another solar provider. And if there is degradation in efficiency, you probably will be seeing it on those older solar farms that were first installed, quite frankly, back in like somewhere around 2015. They have some years on them now. And then finally, yes, inspections on the new generation were done as they were supposed to be done. Certainly when we get a chance to sit with the consultants, we can walk them through inspections, commissioning, and everything that was done prior to acceptance of the Wärtsilä generating units. And I'm sure that examination will bear out that we followed what Mr. Mark understands to be the process on commissioning new generation into our power plants. And so we have no concerns there. And certainly we can make the contract available for Mr. Wright and Mr. Brockman's examination.
Any other comments you'd like to make, Director? Appreciate you joining us today.
No, at this time, nothing further.
I think that concludes this item on our agenda, which is the matters that deal with energy matters. Thank you, WAPA, and thank you to our consultants for the reports and the good questions and the good discussions. I think we got some clarity on how we're moving forward. The next item on the agenda is I guess it would be item 4 now, St. John franchise ferry boat matters. Docket 691, dealing with the hearing examiner's final report, the staff's response to that, the St. John Ferry franchise's response, and some discussion. If we're ready to move on to that, I'd like to just check the room and see if hearing examiner John Hope is in the room, and Attorney Hodge at a minimum representing the ferry boat companies.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Commissioner Hughes. I am on the line.
Good. Attorney Hodge, you with us?
Yes, good morning.
Yes,
Mr.
yes.
Chairman. I'm President St. Thomas at the conference room.
Okay, I'm going to make a couple comments about how we're going to move forward with this today. We got a lot of information that is in front of the commission at the moment. We've received the final report from hearing examiner John Hope. We've taken no action on it. It is simply a recommendation to the commission. It's not an order in any sense. It's not binding on the commission. And the commission has several things within that report that it needs to consider as matters of policy before we can conclude a rate process. In response to that report, Attorney Hodge has offered us a lengthy response objecting to aspects of the report. That report from her was received yesterday, which is not timely. There is no one in the room that has had a reasonable opportunity to digest that, much less make a response. So we are today not going to be discussing in any manner, in any way, the objections, the letter of objections from Attorney Hodge. We are going to take that up in a structured process where Mr. John Hope and staff have an opportunity, general counsel have an opportunity to address her objections in writing, and the commission will take up those written reports in our next meeting. I would just like to counsel both Mr. John Hope and Attorney Hodge that there will be no discussion brooked of any of the objections today. We're here to discuss very specific aspects of the final report, which is at this point not approved, not adopted, but begs some questions of the commission. And I think we can have a really useful conversation today about those aspects and conclude some other policy matters. Anybody that wants to talk about the objections, or for that matter, take up a conversation of personal matters regarding billing issues or anything else, you'll be removed from the meeting and have no further opportunity to speak. So, Mr. John Hope, I'd like to start with you. You've issued a report. I'd like you to restrict your comments here to the process to which you received this very important number, which is the revenue requirement. And you can define what the revenue requirement represents in as simple matter as possible for the public and the commission. And I'd like you to speak specifically about, in your process, what were the data inputs, where did they come from, how severely were they tested, and essentially how did you arrive at the revenue requirement, the revenue required to run this business at a profitable level to the ferry franchises? Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning once again. So I started the inputs for the rate base, and this is the amount of fare that we are going to collect from the passengers, from the public. This is separate than the subsidies. What I did was I took the current expenses, made some reasonable adjustments to them since we're uncoupling the downtown run, and settled on the rate base. Like as I said, the inputs came from the ferry companies themselves. That is the best way to go about it and kind of minimize any any discussion moving forward on where the numbers came from. But I also, in addition to building it from the top down, I also built it from the bottom up. I looked at the projections that the ferry companies put together in their reports and their submittals, and I also built the rate base from the bottom up. So just to kind of back check and make sure that we're all on the same page.
Define rate base for us, please.
The rate base is the allowed recovery for the ferry companies. So it's the amount of money collectively that the ferry companies are able to recover.
Does it represent a calculation or accounting of what types of costs that they're recovering, and at what profit margins?
It is at a profit margin of 8 to 10%. I think that's what the statute allows. It can be as low as 8 and as high as 10. Historically, it's been assessed at 8 to 10% of the applied assets, right? but the math fundamentally changed at some point because the government started buying all the boats. So, once I took a look at the data and the submissions, we realized that the entire operational fleet has been provided by the government. And that fundamentally changes the way that I recommend that the PSC take a look at compensating the ferry companies. The rate base is the same. It's just a little bit different on how you get to that number that they need to operate their business.
So to be fair, the commission, of course, asked for your recommendation, but we passed an order last month which set the permissible fleet structure. That wasn't something you basically determined on your own. You're responding to an order of the commission?
Correct. I was ordered to provide a rate structure that decoupled the routes. I think I would be remiss in my duty to point out that their entire fleet is comprised of their entire operational fleet is comprised of government-owned assets. And the old formula allows them to be compensated, or appears to allow them to be compensated on those government assets. Once you take the government-owned assets out of the equation, how can the ferry companies make the money that they need to make to operate their business? So that's the question that I tried to answer in the final report.
What are the other elements of cost? So there's obviously a capital. You've been talking about the capital cost of the applied assets, where the ferry boat companies would or would not recover an amortization of their applied assets, their capital investment. What are the other elements that go into costs that need to be recovered in the rate base?
Trying to think off the top of my head, other elements that need to be recovered. Expenses, whatever expenses they outlay, for example, operations and maintenance, things like that, they're allowed to recover as well.
Fuel, labor.
Exactly.
Parts.
Yeah. O&M, correct.
And anything they spend on an expense basis, not a capital basis, you take that number, you aggregate it, and essentially come up with a business model. And in this case, you margined it by what percentage of profit?
8%.
Your rate base is an 8%. I understood it was a 10.
No, 8%.
Okay, well, the commissioners should take that into consideration because we have some latitude in that area. We're stipulated by the statutory authority to provide a return to the ferry boat companies between 8 and 10%. So
Correct.
That's a policy question for us. We appreciate your recommendation. On just this item of inputs and revenue requirement and rate base, are there questions from the commission about how that was arrived at? Commissioner McGrath.
I have no questions at this point.
Commissioner Nichols-Sands.
Yes, Mr. Jed John Hope, did you say that fuel, repair, and maintenance, or is it just fuel?
It's all encompassing. So fuel, repairs, maintenance, whatever they outlaid, they are due a return on that. And this is we can argue a little bit about what it costs to run the business, but I think it's only fair that whatever capital it constitutes a qualified expense, they are compensated on that for putting that money at risk.
Okay, I have a question. So is DP, I know that the ferry boat companies are responsible for fuel, but is DPNR responsible for repair and maintenance for maintaining those vehicles?
It would be public works, not DPNR, but go ahead.
Wait,
Yeah,
go ahead.
yeah.
I couldn't hear.
It would be public works that owns
I'm
the
sorry, I
boats.
meant public works. Yeah, I know. I meant public works. I'm sorry. You can go ahead and answer, please.
Yeah, no, DPW, it's public works, but no, the ferry companies are responsible for the routine O&M of the vessels.
Okay, thank you.
Is that cost transferable or no?
Transferable to DPW?
Yes.
I'm sure it could. I'm sure it could be, but as it is right now, it's something that the ferry companies take care of.
Raymond, we've got a number of years of history now on these boats, so we attempt to project what that number might be, and we put that in rates for recovery from the ratepayers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions on the revenue requirement. I understand how it's made. A recommendation of your report talked about
Did you, wait, we
Hughes,
still have another
Hughes.
question. Go
Oh,
ahead.
I'm
Yes,
sorry,
sir.
and I'm sorry, I passed on the senator. Senator, do you have comments or questions?
I do. I wanted to know if one of the factors is any type of insurance risk taken out by the ferry company. Is that included?
Yes, that is included. That is a line item in their P&L. So they do recover. They do recover that.
The salaries for the employees?
That is included as well.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Would it be, would
And
it be,
that includes, if I may,
sorry, go ahead,
Mr.
Senator.
Chairman, that would include all of the fringe benefits, et cetera, for the employees as well?
Correct,
And
correct.
training,
those are-
and any training for employees, is those also included? Just wanted
Correct.
to,
Correct. Those
Okay.
are those would be qualified expenses.
okay,
I would
thank
just,
you.
I would thank you for the comment. I would just like to clarify that in effect, the revenue requirement is a number which includes every single dollar that the ferry boat companies spend to provide this service, plus an amortization of capital invested if they have to buy big ticket items. In this case, I'm sure there is a capital account. It can't be very substantial because it doesn't include the boats. In your report, we talked about you made a recommendation about the third-party ticketing function. Can you talk to us a little bit about what the current problem is and what you have recommended as a solution?
Yeah, so that was something that was very kind of readily evident as far from a data integrity and verification perspective. The two ferry companies at some point were ordered to create the PSC ordered a third-party ticketing solution, but the ferry companies basically started a company 50% owned by each to handle the ticketing function. So in my opinion, that is not a third-party ticketing operation. That is more a division of the current franchise ferry operations. So there is no way to truly independently verify how much revenue is being brought in. And I recommend that the PSC create a truly independent ticketing organization, because that would solve a lot of the issues around data sufficiency and what revenue is actually brought in.
How would we do that?
Just put it out to bid and put out an RFP. I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of companies that can handle a ticketing organization. You probably have to compensate them similarly, 10% of whatever their expenses are, or whatever the rate base is. I think that's the best way to go about it is put out an RFP for a truly independent organization to run the ticketing operations for the ferry system.
Mr. John Hope pointed out earlier that there's been some investment made, of course, by the ferry boat companies in the current system, which may be, they may need to be compensated for to the extent that a third party takes over the existing system. So that's, he's made a recommendation to us as commissioners to go through a process of bidding out a separate ticketing function. This is really one or two people that sit there all day with a computer and take and print tickets and provide the PSC with separate reporting for revenue, which we've never had. So how would you test? We're about to create a rate at some point here, or a collection of rates. What is your recommendation? It's an estimate, and we'd like to think we get it right, but I think you've noted that we have some data integrity issues that probably require some additional testing. What is your recommendation in the report for the commission to run kind of an audit process or a periodic review of the rate structure so that we know that we've gotten it right and the ferry boat companies are profiting but not overly profiting?
Yeah, well, I think that's important given that we are kind of fundamentally talking about changing the way they do business, and you want to make sure that it's fair for the public as well as for the ferry companies. So I would recommend quarterly reporting, upping the reporting frequency, and kind of creating a kind of a standard, route by route analysis of what it costs to operate the routes, and look at the major levers, right? Payroll, fuel, things like that, and then balance that with the revenue brought in. And I think that if you have a truly independent third party ticketing organization, you can look at how many rides are being sold, what money's being brought in, and then on the other side, take a look at the expenses generated by the ferry companies, and say, hey, is this enough? Is this profitable? Is this? Are we balancing the books?
I'll open this up now to questions on those last two topics by the commissioners, talking about the third-party ticketing function and talking about basically the basic testing function. Any questions from any commissioners? Okay.
The entity that is currently collecting the revenues, you said a 50-50 partnership. Is this a separate company?
Yes, it is, but it's technically a separate company, but it's not, because it's owned by the ferry companies themselves.
When I say a separate company, I mean, do they have a business license as a separate company?
Yeah, I'm sure they do. Yes, I would assume so.
And there's no way of auditing that entity to find out the revenues that they've been collecting?
I would say that I stand by my recommendation. It's better if you have a truly third party run that function. I mean, that is your cash register. So you don't want the person that's in charge of expenses to also be in charge of verifying, the money being brought in. It's just a check and balance to make sure that that everything is on the up and up, and you can trust the data. And that was ordered by the PSC when the third party solution was put into place.
How would you probably repay each company depending on who's carrying the more passengers?
I mean, that's not hard. I mean, you'd figure out, who actually, fulfill, this ride or the next, and create a system where, they're paid, X dollars per ride. In an aggregate, you're going to see one company make more than the other if they, in reality, delivered more rides.
I'm not sure I'm inclined to go that way, because we're putting the PSC in the middle of a company's operations, and I don't know if that's the way I want to go. But I'll defer to my fellow commissioners.
I think we are by definition in the middle of every utilities operation. That's our role. I don't want to operate that company as a commission, but I don't have any problem at all, like causing it to be created as we did years ago. The problem is what was created was not what we ordered. What we have is an affiliate under common ownership. That's not the same thing as an independent third party. And the objectivity of that affiliate under common ownership is really not sufficient for what our original order intended to do, which is to give us an auditable revenue point, which we still don't have. Other questions for Mr. John Hope? I'm going to turn the conversation now to the commissioners to talk about a situation we created when we decoupled the downtown route. We still have to conclude our thoughts on regulation of the downtown route. It's part of the ferry boat franchise. And I want to talk a little bit about what the options might be to get into that. It wasn't part of Mr. John Hope's, isn't part of Mr. John Hope's continuing function, although he could be further engaged. we decoupled this for good reasons. It was obscuring the costs of the downtown route are disproportionately unprofitable because of the low ridership and the high costs of providing the service. We decoupled it so that we could get a clean look at what it took to run the Red Hook Cruise Bay route, which I think has been a success. Now we don't have to worry about, additional boat costs and additional fuel and being commingled into this calculation. It provides for a very simple and clean calculation by Mr. John Hope of just the Red Hook Cruise Bay route. But we still have to deal with the downtown route. Our choices are, we can choose to not regulate the route. We're not obligated to provide rate regulation for it. So we can let it float. We can run a separate process and run all these costs back and try and get a sense of what it actually costs to run and set the rate based on that amount. My own personal thought on this is that we should turn this question back to the ferry boat companies and ask them what they think the rate and the schedule should be to run that route as efficiently and profitably as possible that would be attractive to them as the franchisees. And have them come back to us with a recommendation for the rate for that route, which we could then consider in order. That would be how I would conclude this conversation. There are market forces over there, that competition that doesn't exist in the Red Hook Cruise Bay route. So I'd really like to hear from Ms. Varlock as to what she thinks the route should charge, and perhaps we'll just order that. I think that the commission should continue in its regulatory role as for customer service issues for the downtown route, and have some voice in the schedule, although our voice has been frequently ignored by the ferry boat franchises, which is to say that this route hasn't really been regulated. So I'd like other thoughts from you guys. Do you want to regulate this route? Do you want to go through another rate process? Do you want to have the ferry boat companies provide a recommendation for rates and levels of service and allow them to free float a little bit against the competition? I'm going to open that up for commissioners' comment. Senator Joseph, you got thoughts on this?
Walked out.
Well,
She just walked out.
You really can't see Kenny.
Okay, Commissioner McGrath?
Yes, do we know whether the general operation is still subsidizing the downtown run?
The current operation absolutely does. Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
So it's a non-profitable run for the
it's hard to say. We don't have any accounting for the downtown route, so probably not. It's not at what they're charging. I think it's 12 or 13 bucks. Competition's charging 20 plus at this point, but they're making a business of it. So yeah, I want this to be a profitable route, but I really don't want to be involved in setting the rate for it.
Okay, I have some questions for Ms. Varlock.
Excuse me, Commissioner, I don't think that Ms. Varlock should be questioned in the
Okay.
middle of this hearing in which the chairman has
fine.
ordered us not to speak.
I haven't ordered you
I'm
not
the
to
attorney,
speak.
I'm the attorney for the ferry boat companies. We appeared in response to your agenda as published. The chairman told us to be quiet or we'd be removed from the room. But I don't want my client questioned by the commissioners in the midst of this one-sided presentation. I hope you'll understand.
Yes, Attorney
I don't
Hodge,
think it's an argument.
she can speak or
We're
not.
talking about,
Commissioner Sam, let me address that real quickly. She can speak or not. That's always her prerogative. We'd love to hear from her. Your instruction this morning, Attorney Hodge, was that you will not address your letter for objections, of objections. We're not dealing with objections to the rate case right now. We're dealing with the actual recommendations in front of the commission in a very, very limited sense. We're not making determinations. We're taking up that conversation of your objections since they were not received timely in a manner that allows us to do so in a formal way. I would ask Ms.
So,
Varlock.
Mr. Chairman, the very issue you're
Excuse me,
talking
do
about
not
right now
interrupt
is
me.
in the objections.
Attorney Hodge, do not interrupt me. Okay? She may speak, she may not speak to the objections. If she has information in response to questions from the commissioners, welcome to offer those or not. She will not speak to the objections to the hearing examiner's report.
Svarlak, I recommend you not speak until we're permitted to address the matters on this item on the docket.
Commissioner Sam, if you'd like to address Ms. Barlock, and she can make her response or non-response on the record.
Thank you, Commissioner Laura Nichols Sands. I did have some questions concerning the downtown route because that's what we were discussing. I was wondering which one of the companies is presently running the downtown route? One question. Say that again. Can you repeat that, please? Okay.
Del Reese, we can't hear you.
Yeah, good afternoon or good morning. I would retain the advisement of my legal counsel at this time.
Thank you.
Well, then, I have no
questions.
Yeah, I have no questions.
Okay.
I'm not going to get a response to any of my questions. Thank you.
So other comments and questions from the commissioners regarding how we're to deal with, move forward on the downtown route?
Chairman Hughes, since we were gonna operate this way, I think we should revert back to the initial thought, the original thought. We are trying to give the ferryboat companies the opportunity to set their own rate and rate of returns and stuff like that. But if this is how the cooperation is gonna be, I think we should go back and regulate it.
Well, it isn't to say that we're not regulating it if we don't come up with the initial bid, if you will. I'm not saying we're not going to regulate the rate. I'm just saying we allow the ferryboat companies to not just offer us their expenses, that they essentially offer us the rate at which they'd like to operate the route and see if we could reach agreement on that number.
Well, if they're not going to respond, then what information do we have to go by?
I don't know that Ms. Barlock is not going to respond. I think she's not going to respond today, and that's okay. We didn't intend to decide this matter today. I just wanted to get it on the table. I'm sure, given the opportunity to set her own rate, Ms. Barlock might have something to say, but I'm going to honor her desire to not speak today, and she can consider this in the same manner we're considering this, how to get to a resolution of the downtown route.
Can I just say something, Commissioner Laura Nichols Sands?
Sure.
I don't think that Commissioner Hughes is not allowing you guys to speak. We just received the document. We haven't, I speak for myself. I have not had a chance to review it. And I don't like to make any comments or anything about a document I haven't reviewed. So for me, you know, with your response, I haven't had a chance to review it. We just got it. We need to get stuff in a timely manner so that we're prepared as well. Do you understand?
Commissioner Sands, if you were not going to take up the matter today to give you time to review our written objections, I would fully understand that. But to take the report from the hearing examiner in light of the objections we've raised and essentially order us to be silent as that's done is really shocking to me. I'm just speechless here, Commissioner. I don't know what to say about that.
Okay, point taken. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the commissioners regarding how to resolve or how to move forward on the downtown route question? Yeah, I've put my thing out there. Do you guys have any other ideas? What do you want to do?
I do have some ideas. Did you want to go right now?
Go ahead, because I would vote to table it, so go ahead.
I guess for me, I feel like that route should be run seasonally, just because I don't think they have enough ridership for it to run full time throughout the year, and it would be running at a loss probably. So that's my observation. The second thing I would like to hear from the companies or whoever's running the downtown route to find out, would it be beneficial for them to, you know, have us establish rates and work that way, or would it be more beneficial for them to run it privately like a lot of the other companies that are making the downtown run to Red Hook or to wherever they're going? You know, like I think we have the Weston, they have their own private company. I think they run from Crown Bay all the way to their resort. And then there's a couple, I think they pick up at Red Hook. And I think there's another one that leaves from the National Park dock in St. Thomas. And you just mentioned too, Commissioner Hughes, that their rates are like $20, whereas the Varlac or Transportation Service, whoever's running that, that they're only at $12. So I think it might be more beneficial, but that's I would like for that to be their decision to make. I had another one, but I can't remember.
Commissioner Williams?
I think this portion of the conversation should just be tabled.
Okay. I agree. Having not really allowed any other response, Mr. John Hopes or PSC staff to respond necessarily to the report, I think we'll conclude our I guess our information session on the report, having taken no action. And I actually, let me stop. Is there anyone in the room that has registered for public comment on the report? The report was filed timely. Public's had some opportunity to take a look at it. Do we have any public comment in either St. Croix or St. Thomas with respect to the conclusions of the report? Hearing none, we'll move on. We had asked and ordered last session that staff prepare for commissioners' review an audit design which was designed to audit the ferry boat data inputs on labor and fuel consumption, not fuel pricing, just basic consumption, because those are two of the larger cost inputs to this whole rate question. Staff move forward. I'd like to give them an opportunity to come before the commission and present briefly the results with respect to the report that they shared with the commission on this audit process. Who's speaking for the commission?
Good morning, Jamil Springer, PSC Industrial Engineer. In interest of time, I'm just going to give a brief summary of the report. PSC staff were directed to design and potentially conduct an audit of the ferry boat company's fuel and labor costs. On May 20th, 2026, staff monitored the Red Hook and Cruise Bay route. The objective was to gather and analyze data. There were a total of 38 scheduled ferry service runs with a combined ridership of 3,338 passengers. Transportation Services completed 23 service runs, while Varlac Ventures completed 15 service runs. 3 vessels were used, 2 government-owned, Spirit of 1733 and Cruise Bay 1, and private-owned Lady Venture. A series of fuel invoices was submitted to the PSC for the months of March, April, and May. 3 suppliers were used by the ferry companies, 2 from St. Thomas and 1 from St. John. At that time, during the months, St. Thomas diesel prices were in a range of $3.95 to $5.98. And on St. John, diesel prices were in a range of $5.76 to $7.68. Transportation Services submitted a total of 43 invoices at a total cost of $183,760.39. At 83% of that total cost was from St. John at Canal Bay at a total of $153,033.23, while 16% of the cost came from St. Thomas at $30,727.16 for the March to April of 2026. In the month of May 2026, Varlac Ventures had a total number of 22 invoices at a cost of $72,825.45. 92.6% of that cost came from St. Thomas at a total cost of $67,423.90. 7.4% came from St. John at Canal Bay at a total of $5,401.55. The audit confirmed that fuel costs represent a substantial operating expense for both franchise operators. The review of fuel invoices and refueling practices reveals significant price differences between suppliers located on St. Thomas and St. John, with fuel purchase on St. Thomas generally being less expensive. However, operational constraints, vessel scheduling requirements, service obligations, and vessel availability may require operators to purchase fuel at higher cost locations to maintain uninterrupted service. These operational realities should be considered when evaluating fuel-related cost recovery mechanisms, including the emergency fuel surcharge petition. While the audit successfully gathered extensive information regarding vessel operations and fuel expenditures, the review was unable to fully evaluate labor costs due to the absence of detailed labor and personal expense data. As labor costs represent a significant component of overall operating expenses, additional information from the franchise operators will be necessary to complete the Commission's intended assessment of ferryboat operating costs. Such information should include wages, employee benefits, payroll-related expenses, workforce composition, training costs, and other labor-related expenditures. That will conclude my report.
Questions from the Commission. Senator? This is
I don't have
specific to
any.
our, specific to our audit activity.
Well, I don't have any questions at this time. Just came back in and stepped out for a moment.
Commissioner McGross?
No questions.
Commissioner Sams?
No, thank you, Jamal.
Commissioner Wood?
No.
Mr. Springer, so the assignment here and what we were attempting to ascertain was not really expenditures of fuel. What we're trying to determine is how much fuel is consumed within the Red Hook Cruise Bay route based on the boats that are being used. So this had very little to do with fuel invoices. The process of auditing, I guess I'd ask you the question: how do you understand, for instance, the new boat? How do you understand how much fuel is consumed during a day of 22 routes from the work that you did in the audit?
Well, it depends at that time when operations began, how many fuel they have within the certain vessel they're using. Between Red Hook and Cruise Bay, it takes approximately 20 minutes, depending on which vessel they're using. Is it government-owned or private use for, I guess, Warlock Ventures. Speaking with the captain, approximately it takes about 45 gallons of fuel to do service between the Red Hook and Cruise Bay run.
For the day or for every?
For every run.
Okay.
Yeah, for each run.
So the audit process is to verify his statement. What is available to you? What method would you use to validate? Because look, the goal here at the end of the day is we want to understand how much fuel is consumed in a year or a month or a quarter, so that we can use that to determine whether or not the fuel projection expense that is being offered to us in the reports by the ferryboat companies is accurate. These are companies that run these boats other places, that run other boats. We don't really have a way of breaking out an invoice, we need to audit by virtue of consumption, and then we can apply pricing. But the task here was to figure out how much fuel it takes to get from, let's say, round trip or each way, but round trip would be better. And then extrapolate the fact that we do know, which is how many routes get run, how many round trips get run in a week, a year, a month, a quarter. I don't see that our exam here provided us with that information. It would be fuel gauges. It would be a refueling and interval divided by the number of round trips. I mean, if you're doing this in your car and you drive to the airport from your house 20 times round trip, you start with a full tank and then you go to the gas station after 20th round trip and you fill up your tank and now you know how much 20 round trips take to go to the airport and back. We didn't do that here. So we don't really know what the consumption of fuel is other than the statement given to us by the captain. And that's not an audit. That's just a report.
If I could elaborate, Chair, when it comes to a vessel, it does not give as pertaining to numbers of how much fuel is in the vessel. For the older boats, they have a mechanism which they use a fuel stick. and that method is very unprecise. They have their own methods how they can judge how much fuel is in there. The fuel sticks is just a number of lines. There's no numbers at all. For the newer boats, it's just a percentage. They do have a looking glass, but the numbers vary from top to bottom.
Well, how about this? You get on the boat in the morning before they run it and you fill up your tank. You observe the fill up of the tank. The tank is now full. You stay with the boat all day long and you observe the number of trips that it makes. And then you go back to the fuel dock and you refuel. And you divide the number of gallons by the number of trips that you take. And now you know approximately, because weather conditions and the like, seas, wait time at the docks. But then you know approximately how much fuel is consumed in each round trip. And from that, you can extrapolate, honestly, the annual consumption of fuel and apply pricing to that. That was what I had hoped was going to come out of this audit process, was you observing something that was verifiable. Because as you point out, the gauging methods are not particularly reliable for this. But we have not accomplished the goal of the audit, which is to understand the consumption of the three boats, the fuel consumption of the three boats. You only have to really do two of them, Spirit of and one of the other two boats, because they're virtually identical.
If I may, Mr. Chair, that day, Barlock Ventures did not refuel. Only one boat was refueled, which was Spirit of 1733,
So
which was that.
When you design the audit process next time, you'll inform the ferry boat companies that they need to refuel in the morning and the last thing at night. That's going to be part of our process if you want to follow that process. You don't leave it up to the ferry boat companies when you're auditing them how you audit them. You simply tell them this is what we require as data and we'd like you to run this process. So I would suggest that we're going to have to go back and look at this further. It didn't have to be concluded today. But to Mr. John Hope's comments, we have data integrity issues, and this is a big number that needs to be checked. With respect to labor, I got the impression from the report that you have a high level of confidence in at least the headcount necessary to run each boat. Is that a fair statement? Headcount, not wages, not expenses.
That's a fair statement. Coast Guard regulations, at least 4 personnel on the boat.
Okay, so we can understand how many people run with each of these boats, and from that, you can apply the wage structures and the burden rates and everything that the ferry boat companies will then tell you about the expense of each of those people, and multiply that by the number of hours in their payroll, and then you can check against their payroll to see if their labor costs extrapolated over time are accurate to what they have projected. Because it's important that they be accurate to what's projected. That's how we set rates. We have to understand that the major components of this rate are accurate, not guessed at, and they have to be verifiable. So I appreciate your comments about not having the knowledge or the information to extrapolate the total labor cost. But what we were really after, and I think you got it, was understanding and having the ferry boat companies agree that the headcount requirements to operate the boats are consistent over time, and that this is how many hours they run each day, and therefore we can extrapolate at least the total labor component in terms of hours and individuals. From that, you can extrapolate an awful lot of information that's applicable to rates. And we probably could proceed now with the information you did gather and extrapolate that information further. What happened to Red Hook 1 that day? We ran Lady Venture. What's going on with Red Hook 1?
At that time, they was using Red Hook 1.
Where?
Red Hook 1 is, I believe, is assigned to Barlock Ventures, and on that day they was using Lady Venture, which was fully fueled at that time. So
we don't know.
I guess
we don't know why Red Hook 1 was unavailable.
No.
Okay. Do you know the boat capacities of the small government boat and the new government boat?
I believe, I don't have that information with me, but I think it's approximately, well, maybe like 200 passengers.
For which? Because one of those boats is much bigger than the other.
I would believe this two smaller ones, I believe, for the Red Hook and Cruise Bay 1.
You think
Spirit of 1733 might maybe just maybe 50 passengers more than that.
So you think the smaller boats are, well, we don't have to guess, but you think that's up in the 200 range?
Yes.
Okay. So I did note that you gathered extensive information regarding the number of passengers. Did you count heads, or did you just take the reports from the ferry boat companies?
No, staff counted heads.
Okay.
At each location.
Okay. So that seemed to indicate to me that a boat that can carry 200 could have run any one of those routes that day. There wasn't anything above, I think, 150 that ran that day. I know it's it's an off day in June, but what I'm getting at here is how you made the point that Spirit of, is it 1733? Spirit of 1733 is a more expensive boat to run because of its fuel capacity and maybe even its higher labor component. And so ideally, an efficient operation would not run that boat unless it was necessary at high peak times, given that we've got other boats that we could run. I'm just curious how often 1733's got to run. How often do we think that we're going to have to bring the boat that into service, because otherwise we'd be full and leave people at the dock? That would be a question that doesn't actually expect an answer. Okay, well, those are my questions, and I appreciate your report. And I'd like you to consider that we didn't fully answer the questions of the commission that led to its order last month, and we probably need to rethink an approach on how to get at fuel consumption that doesn't involve just taking a receipt from a dock in St. Thomas. The last item we have with respect to the ferry boat companies is to take up the conversation of the emergency fuel petition. And we deferred this from last month. It's still before us, and they are owed an answer. Attorney Sprain, would you mind summarizing where we are and what we've received and what our next step in action might be?
The report is the same as the fuel surcharge.
I'm sorry?
The report that I gave is the same as the
Yes.
fuel surcharge. So it's basically the same.
That's not a separate PSC staff report. It is the same report that you received from Mr. Springer. There's not a.
We have a petition for an emergency fuel surcharge.
Mhm.
It involves an amount of money that we've been asked to authorize in addition to current rates. We need to know how to think about that. Do you want to summarize the petition?
I would actually invite Attorney Hodge to do that summary of her petition.
Attorney Hodge, would you like to speak to this matter?
If permitted to do so.
You're permitted to do that.
Thank you.
I understand that I'm addressing the fuel surcharge, emergency fuel surcharge petition.
That's correct.
And the companies have filed a written petition seeking an emergency fuel surcharge as a result of the interruption in the supply of diesel to
Excuse me
all.
for a second. Commissioner Hughes, she has to be sworn in.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Just keep going, okay? No.
I'm sorry. I couldn't
No,
hear you.
don't worry about me.
She's an officer of the court. I think she's fine.
Okay, thank you.
The emergency petition was filed as a result of the effect on the cost of diesel fuel in the operations of the two ferry boat companies. Obviously, it's an effect on essentially everyone in the world, but in particular, transportation companies, people in the Virgin Islands generally. And the petition that we filed was accompanied by a calculation done by our expert, Mr. Avery Williams, who used to be your expert, who did a calculation recognizing the increase in the cost of fuel to the companies between the beginning month, which I think was January, and the month he did his calculation, which was March, which was almost $3 a gallon difference in the cost of diesel for the single month. For Varlac, the cost of diesel went from $3.85 a gallon to $6.10 a gallon, and for transportation services from $5.76 to $7.68 a gallon. Those numbers have varied a little because the cost of diesel has fluctuated a little, as we've all gathered from reading the newspapers, as the peg of the war has varied over the last few months. But the basic effect of the war in Iran and the effect of the closure of the Strait of Hormuz on the cost of diesel fuel to these two companies has been ongoing and obvious and unavoidable. And the request was to recapture this additional cost on a temporary emergency basis at an addition of 75 cents a ticket until the emergency abates, or at some period of time that you fix. I think one of the commissioners, maybe Commissioner McGrath, at the meeting when this was first mentioned, suggested putting a 3-month period on the surcharge so that it would automatically come back to you for reconsideration. We don't really have an objection to an automatic review. Obviously, this is an unpredictable situation. The one issue that came up after the petition was filed was the fact that Transportation Services has been paying something more for its diesel than Varlac. That had to do with the fact that they had to fuel their vessels at a different location. We filed responses about that with you, so I hope that those answers are understood. The staff's audit function, which I gather was not directly tied to the fuel emergency petition, nevertheless resulted in the opportunity for your own staff to observe the refueling. And I submit to you that there's certainly no indication from that process that there was anything but an honest report to you of what's been going on with the cost of diesel fuel. We got 2 separate letters from your staff thanking the companies for their amazing cooperation in the process. You're aware, I think, that there was literally no warning of this. They were arriving to go on the first vessel, I think, something like 5:30 in the morning, and the letter saying they were coming came at like 7. And they were still welcomed with open arms, invited into every part of the vessels to observe the process and so on. So there's just no reason at all to suggest or believe or suspect that there's anything but an honest report to you of an emergency that requires this surcharge. It is unrelated to the basic rate case, because no matter what the rates underlying are, the fuel emergency is real, and it is in addition to their normal cost of operation. We submitted some documentation to you on why it was not really possible for transportation services to obtain the lower cost of fueling, especially for 1733. Has to do with the fact that
because of the limitations put on the use of that vessel by the federal government. They can't use it for the downtown run, so they can't coordinate refueling at a town location with a run. And I think your staff has indicated in their report about their audit that it really wasn't cost effective to have them go downtown just to get fuel from the alternative supplier. So it was presented to the commission as an emergency, and it's still an emergency, and we urge you to act today to approve this temporary surcharge. Whatever delay there may be in the review of the rates as a whole, I assume will be on your agenda for your next meeting to talk about other issues, but this one I would ask you to act on today.
Thank you, Attorney Hodge. I'm going to suggest that the issue here is not whether or not you're paying more for fuel, because you are absolutely paying a higher price for fuel. We understand that. I think the question that the commission has to consider is, are you over recovering in your current rate base such that you should be able to absorb that higher non-projected cost? We've got a report in front of us, not adopted, but a recommendation from our hearing examiner that your rate base is, I want to say, somewhere in the 5.1 million range necessary to operate the ferries profitably in the current environment. He also is aware of the current rate base, which I think is somewhere up in the $7 million range. For me, I'm wondering if you're collecting an extra $2.5 million above what we're looking at as a recommendation for the new rate. I'm wondering why you can't absorb that additional fuel cost in what you're currently over collecting according to the hearing examiner's calculations, understanding we haven't adopted that recommendation yet. So that would be my comment to my fellow commissioners about how to think about this. I think you're currently over collecting. I think that's been demonstrated by the rate case, and therefore the fuel should be absorbed within the over collection amount of $2 million plus. But I do think we need to resolve this today, and I'll ask for a motion when I'd like to bring Mr. John Hope on just to give us the numbers of the comparative rate basis, just real quickly.
So, Mr. Chairman, even now, am I not permitted to talk about the objections to Mr. John Hope's report? Because if you're going to incorporate his report as a reason for denying this emergency petition, and I am even so silenced in expressing the objections to the report, I'm pretty sure we're approaching the definition of a denial of due process.
I have stated that the report is not accepted, that it is a recommendation, but it is a data point, and it is a data point that I think the commission can easily consider with or without your objection. I'm not going to ask him to defend the number. I'm just going to ask him to put the two numbers out there so that we can understand what is in front of us right now with respect to the difference in rate base. Mr. John Hope?
Yeah, as you correctly stated, the current rate base is around $7 million a year, and I recommended moving it down closer to 5. But I think it's, on top of the over recovery that you mentioned.
I'm gonna stop you there. I just wanted the numbers.
Okay, all right, that's fine. That's fine.
I don't need you to support them or make a case for them. We're not accepting them, but they're a data point for me, and they might be useful to the other commissioners. I'm going to open this up for questions from the other commissioners and then ask for motions with respect to this, because I think it's something we need a Fisher cut bait on. Not fair to just keep waiting and hoping something changes. Commissioner McGrath.
Question, how did you arrive at the 75% surcharge?
So there's a detailed calculation attached to the report, Commissioner McGrath, that was prepared by Avery Williams. He took the total increase in cost of diesel, he divided it by the different categories of customers, and came up with the calculation that 75 cents a ticket would be the amount needed to recover this additional cost of diesel. The additional cost of diesel, I think, was coming to $80,678 a month. So that was it. This is way past my math capacity, but his calculation was that 75 cents a ticket was what was needed to recoup that increase in cost.
Was that 80,000 divided by the number of passengers that travel at that time?
So his charts shows the 80,000, it shows a ridership of 122,784, and it results in a calculation of a recommended surcharge of 75 cents. Technically speaking, it's a few pennies off, but that was his recommended average.
Would you have any objections to considering a lower fuel,
I'm sorry, sir.
Would you have any objection to considering a lower compensation?
Well, this is the amount being requested, but at this point, given the emergency, I think the companies would probably appreciate, any help. They're in a desperate situation.
Thank you.
Commissioner Sands?
I'm good. Wait, you were getting ready to say something.
Boyd?
I actually was looking at, excuse me, Boyd Sprain, general counsel, and this is not a legal response, but I was looking at the spreadsheet, or excuse me, the calculations of Mr. Williams on the tickets, and I can offer a couple of observations. The calculation for the increase in fuel price actually comes out to 66 cents a ticket. The extra part also includes a 7-cent allowance for an increase in docking fees, because the Port Authority has increased docking fees in the current year. And it still would be a couple pennies rounded up, but that's a ballpark. I also just did a quick bit of math and said, as it's been noted, transportation services is paying substantially more for its fuel than Barlac is, because they don't go to the lower priced facility. There's a cost of doing that. I can't speak to whether or not it's cost effective to go pick up the fuel at a lower price when you're buying 1,000 gallons at a time, but if you just gave them the lower cost that Barlac incurs, which is $33,000 in change per month, if you double that to 66,000 and then divide it amongst 122,000, that works out to about 54 cents a ticket. So those are just some of the numbers that you can play with.
I'm sorry.
That was good. That's it.
You go.
I think we need to grant the emergency surcharge, but a departure down from the 75 to the 66 cents. That's my recommendation.
Are you prepared, or are we ready to invite motions?
Motion.
Commissioner Williams?
I move that the PSC grant the ferry boat companies emergency surcharge of 66 cents per gallon for diesel, I think it is.
Per ticket.
I'm sorry, per ticket. For a period of 90 days. So move.
Second. Oh, wait.
There's language in there that after the 90 days, this increase shall sunset unless it is.
I think that's a given, because 90 days, at the 90-day window, if they need to come back, they can.
I think it's likely we'll have set new rates by then, and it'll be a moot point, so.
Okay.
So, any discussion, any further discussion on the motion?
When do you want us to start? Right away? Okay, yeah.
Second motion.
Okay. I have the motions. I just have a point of discussion for Commissioner Williams.
Just before you discuss use, we need to also include the waiver of a 30-day notice, public notice.
True.
Thank you.
I like round numbers. I do. And I think putting a 66-cent charge on a bill almost begs more questions than it answers. Can we go to 60, 65? I mean, something that's just a little more friendly. And by the way, is this for every rider? Because we have a number of classes of heavily subsidized riders for which this will actually be a substantial uptick. Is this all rate classes?
The proposal was all rate classes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so, and I'm sure your math was derived from the idea that there are X number of riders divided by the recovery amount, so that makes sense. Those are my only comments. I don't know, Chairman Williams, if you want to consider a different number, but if you want 66, we have a motion which is seconded before the commission, and I'm prepared to call for the vote.
Yes, that he restate the motion.
The motion is to grant the ferry boat companies an emergency rate increase of 66 cents per ticket for a period of 90 days, and to also waive the public notice requirement, 30-day public notice requirement. So moved.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Roll call.
Commissioner Clement McGrath,
Yes.
Commissioner Lara Nichols Sims.
Yes.
Commissioner Raymond Williams.
Yes.
Commissioner David Hughes.
No.
You have 3 votes in yea, 1 vote in nay.
The motion passes. Last item on the ferry boat companies is a policy discussion amongst the commissioners. Mr. John Hope is still with us to assist us in a couple calculations, but we have this theoretical rate amount that we have to achieve as a total revenue point each year in order to make sure the ferry boat companies operate profitably. Raymond, are you leaving? Because this is 10 minutes would be great.
I'm already overextended.
All right. Well, that's okay. So the opportunity here is that Mr. John Hope has taken his proposed reduction and he split it equally, for simplicity, I think, equally across all rate classes. And I think it was a 21% total decrease in the rate base, and therefore a 21% total rate decrease across all rate classes. So the policy discussion is it's up to the commissioners to determine who pays for the total rate base. And we have the opportunity to spread the burden differently, particularly given that a reduction has been proposed, or at least a change has been proposed. I've asked Mr. John Hope to provide a little bit of a sensitivity spreadsheet so that we can throw numbers at him about how to burden the different rate classes. And I'll start. The rate classes that are currently in the rates are children, seniors, students, bulk ticketing, people that buy like a ticket book, bulk transit of goods and luggage, and non-residents and adults. So we got all these rate classes hanging out there. A number of them have very little contribution at all to total revenue. So there's an opportunity here to simplify some things. And I'm going to suggest, with Mr. John Hope here to back up the numbers, to give us an idea of what the rate base looks like if we want certain people to pay certain rate. And I'm going to suggest that for the benefit of the Virgin Islanders, residents of the Virgin Islands, we should make all students, all children, and all seniors ride these boats for free. They make no measurable, no particularly great contribution to total revenue. It's very easy just to put them on the boats without a contribution to revenue. I would like to hold the line on the $4 baggage charge, and I would like to hold the line on the non-residential $8 rate. And the question then becomes the commuter book, only remaining classes at that point, the commuter book and the adult resident have to be a certain number so that the total revenue is of $5.x million, which is hypothetical, is achieved. And I would suggest that I would like a rate decrease for the current adult population from $6 down to $4.50, and that the commuter book people have an effective per trip. I think they buy them in books of 10. The effective per trip cost of down to $2.50. I don't know what they're at today. And I asked Mr. John Hope to run that number and see if that pays the bills for the ferry boat companies. I would like each commissioner to throw out their thoughts, and it can run the gamut of what he's proposed, which is just a across the board rate decrease for everybody. My permutation, which is free for a lot of people and a reduction for all Virgin Islands residents and holding the line for non-residents. And honestly, there's a permutation here that says we charge the non-residents the entire 5.1 million. And the question would be, well, what would that rate look like if all Virgin Islanders got to ride these boats for free? I'm going to open it up now to Commissioner McGross and Commissioner Nichols Sams for any permutation they want to run with Mr. John Hope and his calculator. And just to get a sense of, this is a policy decision. It doesn't involve the ferry boats. They have no policy role. They have no role whatsoever in setting individual rate classes. This is a right reserved to the commission, and therefore it's a discussion amongst us. I'm just trying to open it today, not resolve it. So Commissioner McGross, Senator Joseph, if you're still with us, I'm very interested in her thoughts on this. It's an opportunity to do something special for the Virgin Islands residents. Who's still in the room? Okay.
Sorry. Senator Joseph is responding.
Okay. At this time, I don't have any major comments. I do want to see how it looks because we do want the ferry companies to be able to operate and pay its bills. And I do like the thought and the idea of granting gratis to the senior population as well as the students. I do like that. I would have to see, and also that we stay consistent with the residents' charges for the ferry boat transportation. But I will have to see some data on how that is done. And I know the commission is typically, you are driven by data in your policy making decisions. So I would look forward to seeing how that is done. Run the numbers again, what you're proposing for the commuter, and why are we only charging $4 for, and not say a good like $6 for the luggage. I think what is the current rate for the luggage?
Currently
fee?
$4.
Yeah, I would definitely increase it to maybe $6, even a nice 10 to look at that, because people pay about $35 right now per luggage, and in some instances it's waived. So I would definitely want to see some type of data and analysis done with these numbers to see if the ferry company would be able to still make a profit, pays bills. They have a lot of bills to pay because they're taking on this service for the government of the Virgin Islands, and also to see how that would look. And just keep in mind our competitors from the BVI, they normally charge a fee too when you are actually leaving and entering into the BVI. So maybe we may want to look at it from that avenue. And it's $20 each way, even without, and you pay, I don't remember if you pay for your luggage. I think there's a cost for your luggage too. But that's something we need to contemplate and look at and analyze as well.
So there is some number, and we're not in agreement on it, obviously, to be fair to Attorney Hodge and the ferry boat companies. There is some number of revenue per year that has to be generated in order to create what we call the rate base. And that is the fair profit return on all expenses of the ferry boats. We're not in agreement on that number, but we have what's been put forth by Mr. John Hope. So it gives us something to at least play with in terms of a rate, prejudicial rate structure, if you will. We have to assume that whatever number we come to is a correct number. So we're going to work with a number. And Mr. John Hope, the calculation here is if you spit out the amount you want to charge for luggage and the amount you want to charge for non-residents and the amount that you want to charge for adults, Mr. John Hope's on the line right now, and he can tell you whether or not you meet or exceed or don't meet the currently proposed $5.1 million number of revenue necessary to run the route. I'll ask just as an example, Mr. John Hope, I want an $8 current hold the line for non-residents. I know that the non-residents are also paying most of the luggage charges because people are carrying luggage when they visit. So I'd like to hold the line on $4 as well. I would like a reduction for the adults to $4.50. I'd like a reduction for the commuter books to $2.50. I'd like everyone else to be free. Mr. John Hope, would that meet the revenue rate, the rate-based requirement?
Yes, yes, it would. You would over recover by about $250,000 per year.
Okay, so the ferry boat companies would make an additional $250,000 with our knowledge. If that was the rate structure against the current proposed rate base. Mr. John Hope, how much would a non-resident have to pay for every Virgin Islands resident that gets on a boat to be free? Not changing any of the luggage stuff.
One second. It would be about $11.
Okay, so I mean that's an option. We already support these ferries with federal subsidies and island subsidies. You know, it's a reasonable position to take that the non-residents support it with nothing other than paying their fare. So that's an option before it's a policy option before the commission. Anybody else want to throw some numbers out for Mr. John Hope? He's got a spreadsheet. It takes about 20 seconds in iteration just to see if that meets the need, the current projected need for the ferry boat company's revenue.
I would just like to say that I support the consumer aspect of reducing the rates. However, it's also the responsibility of the PSC Commission to make sure that the ferry companies are making a profit, a reasonable profit. And
you understand that's a
so you know, I'm willing to look at some permutations of juggling the rates a little bit to ensure that they make a reasonable profit, but also to ensure that the residents of the Virgin Islands get, you know, a good fair rate and a reduced rate if possible.
Okay, that's a discussion that we need to complete about what the rate base is. It doesn't have really much to do with how we cut it up into pieces. So we have a rate base projection by Mr. John Hope. It might be what we agree to, it might not. But that answers your concern, Commissioner McGrath, that the ferry boat companies are making the profit that we've been told they need to make by the legislature. I'm not saying.
I'd also want to hear from the ferry boat companies as to what their rate base number is.
Well,
When
they've
they
offered
came up
that.
with the consultants.
That was part of the hearing examiner process. They offered the data and they made a proposal as to how much they think their rate base is. And that's the process we're going through right now. So anyway, that's the exercise here, and it's a theoretical exercise today, but I wanted to make sure the commission understands that this is the role of the commission to decide who pays that aggregate big number, who pays what piece of it. And it's an opportunity for us to do something differently than we're currently doing. Commissioner Sam, do you have any permutations you want to run?
No, I don't have any permutations I want to run. I understand everything that's been said. I just want to have the opportunity to be able to read everybody's reports. Like I got your report yesterday, had no time to even look at it. So we do need things in a timely manner moving forward, if possible. That's very important. We all have our own jobs and careers or things that we're doing. We're doing this on a part-time basis. So it's really important that we have all this information. So when we do have our monthly meetings, we're able to comment on these things. So I want an opportunity to look at everybody's report. And then I will come forward with any questions I have or ways I like to look at the rate. That's where I am right now. Thank you.
Okay, good. I think that concludes our discussion regarding ferry boat matters today.
May I make a recommendation, Mr. Chairman?
Sure.
May I recommend that each commissioner prepare their own scenario of the rates as they see it for our next meeting? And everybody comes with a proposal and we kind of massage that a little bit, see what works best.
Well,
I know you presented yours today.
Yeah, I
But
think that's
you
a great
presented
idea.
yesterday, and I think it would be good if the other commissioners also.
So the only problem with that is in order to create a scenario of varying rates, we need to agree on what the rate base is, because that's what drives the entire conversation. We can't just all pick a different rate base. Commissioner McGrath can't say, I want the ferry boat companies to have $7 million of revenue, and Commissioner Sam says 6 million, and I say 2. We have to agree on what the proper number of revenue for the ferry boat companies in aggregate is, in order to make a rate division, if you will, or rate structure that meets that number. And I don't know that we're there yet. So I think we have a recommendation from our hearing examiner. It's obviously been objected to by the ferry boat companies. I don't know how we, unless we're all going to adopt, at least in theory, the hearing examiner's $5.1 million number, then it's very difficult to come up with a rate structure that means anything.
Someone's hand is raised. I'm not sure who that is.
Somebody's hand is raised, is it?
Hi, my
Oh,
name is
yeah.
Judy Perez.
Yes,
Hi.
would you identify yourself and who you are?
Turn your
and
camera on.
How you're involved?
Yes, hi. My name is Judy Torres. I am the Chief of Staff for Senator at Large, Angel Bocas Jr. My question is, are all the ferries charging the same rate? Meaning if I go on a ferry boat for one company and they charge me $6, but then I go on another ferry company, but they're charging me 10.
As long as we're talking about the Red Hook and Red Hook to Cruz Bay route, this is a regulated rate, Ms. Torres, and it absolutely should be the same for both companies.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, thank you for your question. Any other comments, commissioners? Thank you, Commissioner McGrath. I don't know that we're all prepared to agree on the rate base number that we need to go forward with, but that's going to obviously be that is the number. That's the big question here. It's why we go through the rate case in general. Nothing else can really happen until we set the rate base. And we have to answer the objections of the ferry boat companies to what's been proposed. Any other comments?
No.
Okay, so let's move on, and I'm going to relinquish the chair to Vice Chair Sams for the remainder of the meeting, which I believe brings us to regulated utilities hurricane preparation. I pass the gavel to Chair Nickel Sams.
Hi. Okay, so the next item is, yes, it's item 3, regulated utilities, energy, and telecommunication providers, the 2026 hurricane preparation and emergency planning, and who speaks on that?
I do. Janae Reynolds, Legal Support Specialist.
Speak up so we can hear you.
Janae Reynolds, Legal Support Specialist. Public Services Commission recognizes that it is imperative that the public utilities, energy and telecom service providers be prepared to respond to hurricanes and other emergencies by having procedures in place to protect their employees, facilities, equipment, and critical infrastructure. On May 11, 2026, the PSC issued its annual emergency preparedness plan request letter to all regulated utilities, energy and telecom service providers of the USVI to be submitted by Friday, May 29th. These plans also help utilities maintain or quickly restore essential services and identify any resource needs or operational challenges that could affect their response efforts. We share these plans with VITEMA so that it can more efficiently prepare and respond. The plans we have received thus far are from Air Voice Wireless, Broadband VI, Liberty VI, IM Telecom doing business as Infinity Mobile, One Communications, Barlock Ventures, Virgin Islands Waste Management Authority, and although we have limited to no jurisdiction over T-Mobile, we have received their plans. Amongst others, we have not received plans from the Water and Power Authority and Transportation Services of St. John. Thank you.
Which ones haven't you received it for?
that we have not received for, WAPA and transportation services.
Have we been in contact with them to ask them when they're gonna be providing that?
I sent a reminder email. It's not just, WAPA and TSG, it's a few more, Land Communications, Tempo Telecom, Terracom, True Connect Communications, and VI Electron. Also, yeah, that's it.
All right, thank you very much. Anybody have any questions or comments about this part of the agenda?
I wasn't sure you got waste management room?
We have received waste management.
Okay, and you mentioned that you didn't receive one communications?
We have.
Okay, you have one communications as well. Okay.
Anybody have any comments or questions?
Just note that as part of our goal here is every year is to make sure we have updated plans. We share those plans with BITEMA so that BITEMA also has current information and can be better prepared and then better responsive in the event of storms.
Thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is number 4, PSC budget matters. And we have a staff report, and who will be presenting that?
Okay, good afternoon, Brenda Connor, Accounts Maintenance Officer.
And again,
Good
loud and booming
afternoon,
voice.
Brenda Connor, Accounts Maintenance Officer. Just here to inform the commission that the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2027 was submitted to OMB, and in the total amount of $2,395,128.59. We will be submitting our testimony to the legislature's Finance Committee on or by July 2nd. And our budget hearing is scheduled for July 9th at 3 p.m.
Let's see, does anybody have any comments or questions about that? Okay, so the next item is item B, suspension of rate investigation, and who reports on that? Let's talk about the VI Waste Management Authority first, please.
I do. Good afternoon, all. I am Tashawn Hendricks, the Assistant Executive Director here at the Public Services Commission. The commission is statutorily obligated to conduct rate investigations every 5 years. Subsequently, the commission engaged the services of hearing examiners to preside over the Waste Management Authority. That would be Attorney Dolis McLean, and for the Water and Power Authority, Mrs. Genevieve Whitaker. In addition to the hearing examiners in the WAPA matters, technical consultants were also selected. To date, both the Waste Management Authority and the Water and Power Authority has failed to pay several years of outstanding annual assessments. Additionally, WAPA has several unpaid docket-specific assessments. These payments are made to the consultants, and we rely heavily on the docket-specific assessments to maintain our obligations to our technical consultants and hearing examiners. Due to our current financial situation, staff is informing the commission that we must suspend the rate investigations listed on today's agenda. As it pertains to the Waste Management Authority, docket 708, that would be the solid waste investigation, and docket 707, that would be the wastewater and septage rate investigation. Staff intends to meet with the Waste Management Authority in a couple of weeks to discuss their ability to satisfy the potential obligations from the upcoming rate investigations. Regarding WAPA, docket-specific assessments for the current fiscal year and previous fiscal years remain unpaid. At this present time, staff is unable to meet the obligations to the hearing examiners and the technical consultants assigned to all WAPA matters.
Thank you, Ms. Hendricks. Do we have any comments or questions about this subject matter? I'm gonna start with David. Do you have any?
I don't know if Director Knight's still on the line. I mean, this impacts his rate base, his base rate case, and I just want to make sure he understands, you know, we're not moving forward on this. We haven't any means.
Is he off?
I don't think.
Director Knight is no longer online. I could speak to that, and he has been very much made aware of that. He's both received a letter to that effect, and we've had discussions with him regarding that effect.
Senator Joseph, do you have any comment?
My only comment would be going to suspend
Can you
the
speak up
rate.
a little bit?
My comment is, and I thank staff for providing the report. My comment would be, if you're going to suspend the investigation, for what period of time are you looking at?
Till we have funding.
Until you have funding, so it could be indefinite.
Cannot proceed without funding.
I understand. Okay.
Do we have any actions that we can take against them? Force them to pay at least something.
This is probably the most dramatic one we can take. As Chair Hughes commented, this will have an effect on WAPA's ability to have any new rates or changes to its rate structure going forward. And WAPA has serious financial issues that need to be addressed. It would be very easy for the commission to bring a lawsuit and get a judgment against WAPA for the amount of the assessments. It would be ineffective, however, because we cannot execute those judgments against WAPA. So rather than wasting our time and energy on a futile lawsuit, we are trying to focus on approaching this. And it is for that reason that we have notified the governor, WAPA, and the legislators so that we have this issue ongoing. We are not looking for a general fund appropriation as a first preference in this, but rather we would rather have those utilities comply with the law and make the payments that they are required to make under their assessments.
And to address the question around time frame, we did receive a verbal indication from the Water and Power Authority that they may be able to make good on payments by the end of June, early July. But until we actually receive payments on hand, we're unfortunately unable to proceed with the rate investigations.
Okay, and are you looking for full payment or partial payment?
WAPA has indicated verbally that they will satisfy the entire fiscal year of 2026 annual assessments. However, we rely on docket-specific assessments to pay our consultants, and we have not gotten a commitment for that.
Anybody else have any more comments on this subject matter? Okay, and that is the last subject matter for today. Thanks. I want to thank everybody for attending, and this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, now I gotta figure out this.